Deep below the surface, where sunlight dies and the ocean turns black, something 40 feet long floats in total silence. It has the largest eyes of any animal alive, eyes the size of dinner plates, built to see threats coming before they arrive. And yet, when a swordfish enters that darkness, it panics, will go inside the twilight zone, meet the creature that built a sword out of its own skull, and find out why the ocean's most feared giant still loses sleep over a fish. If this sounds like something you want, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Prepare yourselves. There is a creature living right now, as you hear this, floating in total darkness half a mile below the ocean's surface. It weighs more than 600 pounds. It has 8 muscular arms lined with razor-edged suckers and 2 longer tentacles that can fire out like a harpoon in a fraction of a second. At the center of all those limbs sits a beak made of one of the hardest materials in nature, strong enough to sever a fish's spine cleanly. And it has been down there, ruling that darkness for millions of years. This is the giant squid, and for almost all of its existence, the deep ocean belonged to it. To understand why that changed, you have to understand what made the giant squid so dominant in the first place. It did not need speed. It did not need to chase anything. It simply waited. In the permanent cold of the deep sea, patience is the most efficient strategy possible, and the giant squid perfected it. It would hover almost motionless in the water column, burning almost no energy, and wait for something smaller to drift within range. Then those 2 long tentacles would fire. The prey never saw it coming. Scientists call this ambush predation. The squid is not chasing dinner across open water. It is the dinner that moves toward the squid without ever knowing the squid is there. For that strategy to work, invisibility is everything. The giant squid solved that problem in a deeply strange way. It filled its body with a chemical called ammonium chloride, a solution that is lighter than seawater. This keeps the squid neutrally buoyant, meaning it neither sinks nor rises. It just hangs in the water with almost no effort, completely still, utterly invisible in the dark. No bubbles, no movement, no noise. But that chemical comes with a cost. Ammonium chloride tastes like rotten licorice. It permeates every cell of the squid's body. This makes the giant squid one of the only enormous animals in the ocean that almost nothing actually wants to eat. Even sperm whales, which do hunt them, have to override a genuinely unpleasant meal to do it. So here is what the giant squid had going for it. For millions of years, it was invisible. It was patient. It was heavily armed. It tasted awful. It lived in water so deep and so cold and so dark that most predators simply could not function down there. The deep ocean was a fortress, and the giant squid was inside it. Then, roughly 50 million years ago, something happened. Whales figured out how to go deep. They developed echolocation, a sonar system so precise it could ping a motionless squid through absolute darkness from hundreds of feet away. Suddenly, the squid's greatest defense, its stillness and its silence, became a liability. Staying still just made it easier to lock onto. The squid adapted. Its eyes grew enormous, larger than those of any other living animal, larger than a basketball on a large specimen, built to detect the faint glow of bioluminescent plankton stirred up by an approaching whale long before the whale got close enough to use its sonar effectively. The squid turned the darkness into a warning system. For a long time, that worked, but the twilight zone beneath the ocean had another predator evolving, a different kind of hunter, one that did not hunt by sound, one that hunted by sight, the same sense the squid had built its whole defense around, one that grew a sword out of its own skull. The giant squid had been the apex creature of its world for millions of years. It had answers for almost every threat, and then it met one it did not have an answer for. That meeting is still happening. Right now, in the dark, stories about the giant squid have been getting bigger for centuries. Sailors once reported monsters 60 feet long dragging ships down. Old naturalists wrote about tentacles that could reach across the deck of a fishing vessel. The myth of the Kraken, the legendary sea beast of Norse legend, almost certainly grew from real encounters with this animal, encounters where terrified sailors glimpsed something enormous and dark rising from the deep, and then let their imaginations fill in the rest. The real animal is impressive enough without the exaggeration. Female giant squids are the larger of the two sexes. The largest confirmed specimens reach about 43 feet in total length when you include the two long feeding tentacles. The body alone, the mantle, which is the main torpedo-shaped section that houses the organs, can grow to about 7 feet. Males are smaller, topping out around 33 feet with tentacles included. To picture 43 feet, think of a school bus. A standard school bus is around 35 feet long. A large female giant squid stretches past it. But here is where things get tricky. Those tentacles can stretch. They are elastic, almost like rubber bands, and a dead squid pulled from the ocean can be tugged and measured in ways that exaggerate the real length significantly. Scientists use mantle length as the more reliable measurement precisely because of this problem. The body alone is the honest number. The total length, including tentacles, is the dramatic one. Weight tells a more grounded story. A large giant squid can weigh over 600 pounds. That is heavier than a full-grown grizzly bear. And this is an animal with no skeleton, no bones. Its body is held together by muscle, water, and that ammonium chloride solution. And yet it somehow manages to be one of the most powerful hunters in its environment. The arms are each lined with suckers from base to tip. The suckers are not smooth. They are ringed with serrated chitin, a hard material similar to what makes up your fingernails, only shaped into tiny teeth. When a giant squid wraps its arms around prey, those serrated rings bite in. The prey does not slide off. The grip is mechanical and deeply unpleasant. The two feeding tentacles are longer and thinner than the arms, and they fire differently. They stay coiled near the body until the moment of attack, then shoot forward at explosive speed to strike prey up to 30 feet away. The clubs at the ends are studded with larger, more powerful suckers, designed to latch on instantly. By the time prey feels the impact, the tentacles are already retracting, dragging the meal back toward that central beak. That beak is worth stopping on for a moment. It looks exactly like a parrot's beak, a curved, hooked structure made of chitin hardened with protein, and it is one of the few parts of the squid's body that does not break down inside a sperm whale's stomach. Scientists have found giant squid beaks inside whales for over a century. The beaks outlast everything else. They become the permanent record of a predator's meal, a hard signature left inside the whale's gut long after every other piece of the squid has been digested. The esophagus runs straight through the brain. This means every piece of food the squid swallows must be small enough to pass through without damaging its own nervous system. The beak's job is to slice the meal into pieces thin enough to fit. A brain that gets hit by a large chunk of food is a brain that gets damaged. The squid evolved around this constraint in a way that seems almost absurd, but it works. 43 feet long, 600 pounds, no bones. A beak made of biological armor, armed at every surface with serrated teeth, and hiding in darkness half a mile down. Coming up, we go to that darkness, and we find out what lives alongside the giant squid in the layer of ocean most humans have never heard of. Imagine the ocean as a building with many floors. The top floor is the sunlit zone. From the surface down to about 600 feet, sunlight reaches everything. Fish hunt by sight. Colors matter. Dolphins, tuna, and sea turtles live here. This is the ocean people picture when they think of the ocean. Below that, everything changes. From about 600 feet down to roughly 3,000 feet sits a layer called the mesopelagic zone. Scientists also call it the twilight zone, and the name fits. Sunlight technically reaches this layer, but barely. By the time it filters down this deep, It has lost almost all its strength. To human eyes, this layer appears pitch black, but to the animals that evolved here, it is something more complicated than complete darkness. There are faint glimmers, the last dying photons from above, flashes of bioluminescence from the creatures living here, blue-green sparks produced by organisms that generate their own light. It is the most expansive habitat on Earth. The mesopelagic zone makes up roughly 20% of the total volume of the ocean. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of space. All of it cold, all of it dim, almost none of it explored. Temperatures here hover between about 35 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The pressure is crushing compared to the surface, enough to collapse a human lung in seconds. There is no warm, comfortable middle ground. Everything alive in this layer has adapted to function in conditions that would kill most surface creatures within minutes. And yet, it is packed with life. The twilight zone is full of lanternfish, small creatures that produce their own bioluminescent light. It holds bristlemouth fish, which may be among the most numerous vertebrates on the planet. It holds jellies, crustaceans, and enormous numbers of squid of all sizes. Every evening, at sunset, a massive migration happens. Trillions of animals travel upward from the twilight zone toward the surface to feed in the cover of darkness, then retreat back down before dawn. Scientists call this the deep scattering layer. It gets its name from the fact that it scatters sonar pings, showing up on underwater detection equipment as a false floor that moves up and down with the light cycle. For decades, sailors thought they were seeing an unexpected shallow bottom. Then they realized the bottom was moving. It was alive. This is the world where the giant squid lives. And this is the world the swordfish visits every single day. The swordfish comes from above. It spends the night closer to the surface, hunting in warmer water. Then, as the deep scattering layer descends at dawn and the animals it contains sink back down into the twilight zone, the swordfish follows. It dives into water as cold as 35 degrees Fahrenheit, down past 600 feet, sometimes far deeper, hunting in conditions where almost no other large predator can function. 2 apex hunters. One layer of ocean. One is the permanent resident. The other is an invader that shows up every morning with a 4-foot blade attached to its face. The overlap between these two animals is not an accident, and it is not rare. It happens every day, in oceans across the entire planet. But before we see what the swordfish can do, we need to understand exactly how the giant squid sees in this darkness. Because the answer involves the most extraordinary eyes ever measured in any living creature. Picture a basketball. The eyes of the largest giant squid specimens grow to roughly that size, 10 inches across. The diameter of a basketball, a single eye 10 inches wide. For comparison, the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on Earth, has eyes about 6 inches in diameter. The giant squid's eyes are bigger than the eyes of the blue whale. This is remarkable for an obvious reason. The blue whale is hundreds of times larger than the giant squid. It has a body the length of 2 school buses, and the squid still beats it on eyeball size. These are the largest eyes of any living animal on the planet. The reason they exist is darkness. In the twilight zone, there is almost no light to work with. Whatever tiny amount filters down from the surface is barely detectable. The only other sources of illumination are the bioluminescent flashes of other creatures, brief and faint pulses of blue and green light produced by organisms when they are disturbed. In order to see anything at all in this environment, an eye needs to be as large as possible. A larger eye means a larger lens. A larger lens gathers more of the available light, and more light means the ability to detect things that smaller eyes would simply miss entirely. The squid's eye is built for a single core purpose: catch every photon that exists in the darkness around it. The pupil alone on a large specimen can reach 9 centimeters across. To put that in context, a human pupil in total darkness dilates to about 8 millimeters. The squid's pupil is more than 11 times wider. Every photon of faint bioluminescent light that passes anywhere near that eye gets captured. This makes the giant squid extraordinarily sensitive to movement in the dark. A fish drifting by and triggering a tiny pulse of bioluminescence from nearby plankton becomes visible to the squid from a significant distance. The squid does not need the prey to be illuminated. It needs the darkness around the prey to flicker. For a long time, scientists assumed these enormous eyes were primarily hunting tools. A bigger eye meant the squid could spot prey earlier and from farther away. That made intuitive sense. Then a research team published a study in 2012 that changed the entire picture. The eyes were not primarily for hunting. They were for something else entirely, something the squid feared more than anything. And when that discovery was made, it also explained why swordfish cause such a specific kind of terror in giant squid. But to understand what that 2012 study revealed, we first have to look at what those eyes were actually designed to track in the darkness. Because the answer involves a predator that has been hunting the giant squid for tens of millions of years. And it has almost nothing to do with light. In 2012, a group of scientists published a paper that reframed everything biologists thought they understood about the giant squid's eyes. The question they were trying to answer sounds simple on the surface. Why would any animal need eyes 10 inches wide? Bigger eyes cost more energy to grow and maintain. There had to be a specific payoff that justified that cost. So what was it? The scientists ran calculations. They modeled how different sized eyes perform in the conditions of the twilight zone. They compared how well a large eye versus a smaller eye could detect different kinds of objects at depth, prey-sized creatures, creatures of similar size, and very large creatures. For detecting small prey, it turned out that a massive eye did not help much. Once eyes reach a certain size, they stop getting meaningfully better at spotting small objects in dim water. The returns diminish quickly. Making an eye bigger than about 3 or 4 inches provides almost no additional advantage for hunting fish or other squid. But for detecting very large objects, something completely different happened. The calculations showed that as an eye grows beyond a certain size, it becomes dramatically better at picking up the faint bioluminescent glow created when a massive animal moves through water full of tiny light-producing organisms. A huge animal pushing through water disturbs those organisms and sets them flashing, creating a diffuse cloud of light that spreads outward in the darkness. That cloud is not a point of light. It is a wide, soft glow spread across a large area. Small eyes cannot detect it reliably. Very large eyes can. The scientists concluded that the giant squid's eyes did not evolve to hunt better. They evolved to detect one specific thing: an approaching sperm whale. A sperm whale diving through the twilight zone at depth triggers bioluminescent plankton as it moves. The glow spreads out. A giant squid with eyes 10 inches wide can detect that glow from a distance of roughly 400 feet away. That is just over the length of a football field. 400 feet of warning before the whale arrives. 400 feet is enough to run, enough to jet away before the whale can lock on with its sonar, enough to survive. The squid's enormous eyes are essentially an early warning radar, built and calibrated specifically for sperm whales. Millions of years of being hunted by whales shaped those eyes into something extraordinary. But here is the problem. The sperm whale triggers bioluminescence because it is large and it moves through the water. Any large, fast animal moving through the twilight zone does the same thing. Any hunter diving at speed through water full of bioluminescent plankton creates that same diffuse glow. And the squid's eyes do not distinguish between a whale and another large, fast predator. They detect the signal, the spreading glow of disturbed plankton, and they fire the alarm regardless of what created it. A swordfish diving at full speed into the twilight zone creates exactly the same signal. The squid's early warning system, built over millions of years to detect sperm whales, responds to swordfish the same way. Full panic, immediate flight response. Even though the threat is completely different, moves differently, attacks differently, and requires a completely different response, the squid's eyes are brilliant, and they are also, in a very specific way, being fooled. The giant squid does not have bones. Inside its body, there is a thin, flexible structure called the gladius, sometimes called the pen, a lightweight internal support that runs along the top of the mantle like a transparent feather quill. It holds the body's shape without being rigid. Everything else is muscle, organ, and fluid. That fluid is the secret to one of the giant squid's most important survival tools. Most fish that swim in the ocean use a swim bladder to control their buoyancy. A swim bladder is a gas-filled sac inside the fish's body. By adjusting the amount of gas inside, the fish can rise or sink in the water column without using any muscular effort. It is an elegant system, but it has a serious problem at extreme depth. The pressure deep in the ocean is immense, and under that pressure, gas compresses. A fish dragged quickly up from deep water can have its swim bladder expand violently as pressure drops, which is often fatal. The giant squid uses a completely different approach. Its body is saturated with ammonium chloride solution. This chemical is less dense than seawater, meaning it provides lift. By circulating this solution throughout its body tissues rather than keeping it in a separate sac, the squid achieves neutral buoyancy. It floats effortlessly at any depth, in any direction, without a single muscle contraction. Rising pressure, falling pressure, it makes no difference. There is no gas sac to explode. The squid hangs in the water like a ghost, still, silent, perfectly balanced. This buoyancy system allows the ambush hunting strategy to work. If a squid had to actively swim to maintain its position in the water column, it would produce movement, vibration, and noise. Predators and prey alike would detect it. The ammonium chloride trick eliminates all of that. The squid simply is present and waiting, but the chemical comes with that remarkable side effect. Ammonium chloride tastes intensely unpleasant to almost everything. It has been described as rotten, salty licorice, or the sharp chemical burn of ammonia itself. It permeates every cell of the squid's body. The meat of a giant squid is not just unappetizing, it is genuinely nauseating for most predators to consume. Even sperm whales, which eat giant squid regularly, are consuming something that most other ocean predators would reject immediately. This makes the giant squid almost nutritionally useless as a food source for the majority of ocean hunters. Something that weighs over 600 pounds should be an extraordinary meal. Instead, most hunters that encounter one decide the reward is not worth the taste. There are two known exceptions: sperm whales, which evolved to tolerate it, and swordfish, which are far less selective about what they eat and whose prey choice is driven more by availability and opportunity than by preference. Scientists examining swordfish stomachs have found squid remains consistently and in large quantities. In some studies, squid made up over half the total prey weight found in swordfish guts. Across hundreds of sampled swordfish in the Pacific, cephalopods dominated the diet. The swordfish does not seem to find the ammonium chloride deterrent in the way other predators do, or it simply burns through prey fast enough that chemical unpleasantness does not register as a reason to stop. The squid's chemical armor works beautifully against most of the ocean. Against the swordfish, it provides almost no protection at all. The giant squid's body is a precision hunting system with 10 moving parts working in sequence. Start at the tips. The two feeding tentacles are the longest structures on the squid's body, sometimes exceeding the length of the mantle and arms combined. They stay coiled and retracted near the squid's body until the moment of an attack. When prey is detected, both tentacles fire outward simultaneously at explosive speed. The strike covers up to 30 feet in a fraction of a second. At the end of each tentacle is a club-shaped tip, studded with suckers that are larger and more powerful than anything on the arms. These clubs are built to latch onto prey on contact and hold it against the squid's own body weight. Once the tentacles have the prey, the 8 arms take over. The arms are shorter, thicker, and more muscular than the tentacles. Their entire length is lined with suckers, each one ringed with those serrated chitin teeth. The arms close around the prey and secure it while the tentacles retract. The grip that results is mechanical and extremely difficult to break. The serrated rings are not there to cut. They are there to bite in and prevent sliding. Every time prey struggles, the rings dig deeper. At the center of all 10 limbs sits the beak. The beak is paired, upper and lower, like a parrot's, and made of chitin hardened with protein. It is one of the hardest biological structures produced by any invertebrate. The giant squid's esophagus runs directly through its brain, which means every piece of food that gets swallowed must be sliced down to a size that will not damage the brain on the way through. The beak handles that job. It bites and shears food into fragments small enough to pass safely. Behind the beak sits the radula. This is a tongue covered in backward-facing teeth, rows of them, that further shred food after the beak has sliced it. By the time prey has passed through the beak and across the radula, it is in pieces small enough to travel through the narrow esophagus without risk to the brain. The squid's 3 hearts keep this system supplied. 2 pump blood through the gills. 1 pumps it through the rest of the body. That blood is blue because it carries copper instead of iron. The jet propulsion system sits separately from all the arms and beaks. The squid draws water into its mantle cavity, then contracts the powerful muscles around the mantle and forces that water out through a muscular tube called the siphon. The siphon can be aimed in different directions, giving the squid control over where it goes when it jets. In a crisis, a full jet contraction can move the squid backward with enough force to close significant distance in seconds. The ink sac holds the last resort option. A dark cloud of melanin-rich fluid ejected from the siphon creates an instant visual screen in the water. The cloud holds its shape for long enough to obscure the squid's escape direction. Some of the chemical compounds in the ink also interfere temporarily with a predator's sense of smell. This is the system that has kept the giant squid alive for millions of years. 10 limbs, a beak, a jet, and a smokescreen. And all of it is about to meet something that attacks before any of it can fully engage. For most of human history, the giant squid was a rumor. Sailors described it, bodies washed up dead on beaches. Sperm whale carcasses bore circular scars from suckers. Scientists found the hard, indigestible beaks packed inside whale stomachs, proof that the animal existed, that whales were eating it regularly. But nobody had ever seen a live giant squid in its actual home. The first photograph of a live giant squid in its natural habitat was taken in September of 2004. A Japanese researcher named Tsunemi Kubodera set a baited line down to about 3,000 feet near the Ogasawara Islands south of Tokyo and waited. The camera attached to the line eventually captured a series of images of a giant squid attacking the bait, wrapping its arms around it, and then losing a tentacle in the struggle when it pulled away. The images were grainy, taken from a motionless camera rather than any kind of submersible, but they were real. The first confirmed photographs of a living giant squid in its deep environment. Then came the footage. In 2006, Kubodera's team pulled a live giant squid to the surface for the first time and filmed it. A female, about 24 feet long, she attacked bait hanging below the research vessel and was pulled up still alive. The footage was the first video of a living giant squid ever recorded. She died at the surface, but the images proved the animal was out there, active, hunting, real. But true deep footage, a camera descending into the twilight zone and finding the squid in its actual world, took years more. In July of 2012, Kubodera joined forces with the American bioluminescence researcher Edith Widder and a team that included NHK, Japan's national broadcaster, and the Discovery Channel. They had made around 100 dives in a small 3-person submersible in previous expeditions, and every single one came up empty. The problem was the vehicle itself. Standard submersibles use bright white lights and noisy thrusters to move through the water. The giant squid's massive eyes are extraordinarily sensitive to light. Every time a conventional submersible descended, it was like turning on a stadium light in a dark room. Every creature in range fled immediately. Widder's solution was to use lights that were invisible to the squid. Near-infrared illumination, beyond the visible spectrum of the squid's eye, allowed the team to see without being seen. No bright lights, no noise. The submersible drifted in silence. On a dive more than 2,000 feet down near the Ogasawara Islands, the squid came to them. It was about 10 feet long on camera, smaller than the largest known specimens, and missing its two longest tentacles. Scientists estimated that if those tentacles had been intact, the animal would have been close to 23 feet. It was silver and iridescent in the faint illumination, completely unlike the reddish-brown color the dead specimens had shown. Alive, in its element, it was something else entirely. The researcher called it stunning, said he could not have dreamed it would be so beautiful. What the footage showed, the world was an animal that moved with absolute confidence in its environment, in its darkness, in its home. A home that something else was about to enter, with far less beautiful intentions. The 2012 footage changed how scientists thought about the giant squid, but getting it required solving a problem that had defeated every previous attempt for decades. The core problem was deceptively simple. The twilight zone is enormous. The giant squid lives somewhere inside it, but the zone spans from 600 to 3,000 feet down across every ocean on Earth. Dropping a camera into that space and expecting to find one specific animal is like lowering a camera through your bedroom window and expecting it to photograph a specific bee in your backyard at night, a backyard 3 miles wide. The first approach most researchers tried was nets. Drag nets through the twilight zone and see what comes up. This works for collecting dead or dying specimens, and almost every confirmed giant squid specimen for over a century came from exactly this method. But nets collect animals that are already dead or fatally damaged, and they tell scientists almost nothing about behavior, movement, or ecology. The second approach was baited cameras. Lower a camera and bait to depth and wait for something to come investigate. Kubodera's 2004 photographs came from this method. The problem is that a baited camera descending on a cable makes noise. The cable vibrates. The mechanism that lowers it creates sound. And the giant squid, which evolved in near total silence, detects these disturbances and avoids them. The third approach was submersibles. Go down in a vehicle and look. This ran directly into the light problem. Every submersible bright enough for human crew to see was also bright enough to blind or alarm a giant squid. The squid's dinner plate eyes, adapted to detect the faintest possible bioluminescent flickers, are overwhelmed by artificial white light the way you would be overwhelmed by a flashlight aimed directly at your eyes in a completely dark room. Multiply that by several orders of magnitude. The squid would simply not approach. Widder's insight was built around a different question. Instead of asking how to find the squid, she asked what the squid might come to on its own. She developed an optical lure that mimicked the bioluminescent distress display of a deep-sea jellyfish. This jellyfish, when caught by a predator, produces a spinning ring of blue light as a distress signal. The idea is that the light attracts the attention of an even larger predator, which then attacks the first predator and frees the jellyfish. Scientists call this the burglar alarm effect. Widder built a device that reproduced this light pattern and attached it to the submersible. The near-infrared lights allowed the team to film in total darkness without the squid detecting the illumination. The optical lure gave the squid a reason to approach. The combination worked. What this process reveals about the giant squid goes beyond just its elusiveness. The animal is so attuned to the specific light signals of its environment that it responds to bioluminescent patterns it recognizes. It treats a spinning ring of light as a potential feeding opportunity. Its brain is processing visual information from the dark at a level that scientists are still only beginning to understand. An animal this finely tuned to its environment, this sensitive to every flicker of light in the deep ocean, is going to react to any disruption in its environment with extreme alertness. A swordfish diving into the twilight zone at speed is a disruption on a significant scale. The swordfish is not subtle. It reaches 14 feet in length, It weighs up to 1,200 pounds. It has no pelvic fins and no scales as an adult, a stripped-down, pure function body built around one single priority, moving through water as fast as possible. And attached to the front of its face, extending from the upper jaw, is a flat, bony blade that can reach more than 4 feet in length. That blade is made of bone, but not ordinary bone. Scientists have analyzed the internal structure of the swordfish's bill and found it is built to absorb repeated high-force impacts without fracturing. The internal architecture consists of alternating layers that distribute stress away from any single point, similar in principle to how composite materials in modern engineering are designed to resist cracking. It is a biological impact tool that can absorb hundreds of slashing strikes through dense water without breaking. The swordfish is the only member of its entire family. There are no close relatives, no sibling species. No other fish on Earth builds quite this specific combination of features. The scientific name Xiphias gladius translates roughly as sword. The ancient Greeks and Romans both gave it names that meant the same thing, a sharp, flat blade, because that is the feature that defines everything about this animal. The swordfish lives at the surface and in warm water much of the time, particularly at night. It ranges through every major ocean on Earth, from cold, temperate water near the poles to the warm tropics. Migrations of thousands of miles are normal. Tagged individuals have been tracked crossing entire ocean basins, but the surface is only part of the swordfish's world. Tracking data from tagged swordfish shows that during daylight hours, they conduct deep dives into the mesopelagic zone on a regular basis. These dives are not occasional behavior. They are a daily routine, driven by the movement of prey. The animals they feed on, primarily squid and deep-sea fish, descend into the twilight zone at dawn, and the swordfish follows them down. Maximum recorded dive depth for a tagged swordfish is over 3,700 feet. That is deep enough to put it well into the heart of giant squid territory. A 1,200-pound predator with a 4-foot blade and burst speeds estimated between 35 and 50 miles per hour, diving into the world's most lightless hunting ground every single day. The giant squid has been managing that environment for millions of years. It has answers for almost every threat it has faced across that time. What it does not have is an answer for a predator with heated eyes. The swordfish's bill looks like a weapon built for stabbing. Long, flat, pointed, rigid. It seems like the obvious use would be to drive it through prey like a spear. It does not work that way. Scientists examining prey fish recovered from swordfish hunting grounds found a consistent pattern. The prey was slashed, cut marks across their bodies, severed fins, injuries consistent with a lateral sweeping blow rather than a straight-line puncture. The swordfish does not impale prey. It slashes through a group of them, stunning and injuring as many as possible in a single high-speed pass, then circles back to consume the ones that can no longer escape. The technique is built around the bill's flat profile. A flat blade moving laterally through water, swung at speed, covers a wide area. A school of fish, a cluster of squid, a group of deep-sea creatures bunched together in the mesopelagic zone. All of them fall within the arc of a single sweeping strike. The swordfish accelerates to full speed, drives through the center of the group with its bill sweeping from side to side, and multiple prey are hit simultaneously. Then it slows, turns. The stunned and injured animals are still there, too disoriented or too damaged to flee effectively. The swordfish picks them up at leisure. Researchers looking at the bill's structural properties found it is optimized for this kind of lateral loading. The flat cross-section is strong against the forces experienced during a sideways slash. It would actually be weaker if the fish tried to stab directly forward at speed, because that creates a different force profile that the bill's structure is not designed for. The bill also functions as a hydrodynamic tool in another way. The skin of an adult swordfish has no scales. The body is smooth, reducing friction against water. The elongated bill extending from the face changes the flow of water around the head, affecting how the fish moves through the water at high speed. The exact contribution of the bill to hydrodynamics is still studied, but the swordfish's body is clearly designed as a unified high-speed package, not as a collection of separate tools that happen to end up on the same animal. For a giant squid, the implications of the slash-and-circle technique are specific and serious. The squid's escape system depends on its tentacles. The two long feeding tentacles are also its primary propulsion extension when jetting away. They stream behind the squid as it moves. They are the first structures a slashing swordfish bill is likely to contact. A single slash that severs or badly damages a feeding tentacle does not kill the squid, but it destroys the squid's most important offensive tool instantly. A squid with damaged tentacles cannot strike prey at distance. It cannot grab at speed. Its hunting ability is dramatically reduced, and its defense against follow-up attacks is compromised in the same moment. One pass from a swordfish changes the entire encounter. The twilight zone is cold. At 300 to 1,000 feet down, water temperatures hover around 35 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, most biological processes slow down significantly. Cold blood moves sluggishly. Cold muscles contract more slowly. Cold neurons fire with reduced speed. For cold-blooded animals, which make up the overwhelming majority of sea life, deep cold water is a place where reaction times get longer and movements get slower. This is a major reason why most large predators stay at the surface. The energy cost of diving deep is significant, and the cold environment at depth limits how effectively a cold-blooded animal can hunt once it gets there. The swordfish solved this problem by evolving a heater. Inside the skull of a swordfish, adjacent to each eye, sits a specialized organ. It is derived from a muscle, the extraocular muscle that originally moved the eye in its socket. Over millions of years of evolution, this muscle converted its function. Instead of moving the eye, it generates heat. The cells in this organ are packed with mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside cells, and they burn energy specifically to produce warmth rather than movement. That warmth goes to the brain and the eyes. The swordfish can maintain its eye and brain temperature at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius above the surrounding water temperature. In the cold twilight zone, where water might be near freezing, the swordfish's eyes and brain are functioning at a temperature more like warm surface water. This is not a small advantage. It is a transformation of the entire hunting equation. Research published in the journal Current Biology measured the effect directly by testing swordfish retinas at different temperatures. At the cold temperatures of deep water, a retina functions slowly. At the heated temperature the swordfish maintains, the same retina functions 10 times faster, 10 times. That means the swordfish's eyes, at depth, process visual information 10 times faster than the eyes of any cold-blooded animal around it. The giant squid in the same water column, despite having enormous eyes, is running visual processing at cold blood speed. The swordfish, despite having much smaller eyes, is running its visual system at a speed that makes the squid appear to be moving in slow motion. What was already a dangerous predator became something significantly more threatening, and what the squid relies on most, its ability to detect and respond to danger through its enormous, light-sensitive eyes, just met something that can outprocess it at depth. A camera's shutter speed determines how clearly it can capture fast movement. Set the shutter too slow, and a moving object becomes a blur. Set it fast and you freeze the motion cleanly. The faster the shutter, the more detail you capture in a scene where things are moving quickly. A retina works on a similar principle. It has what scientists call temporal resolution, the ability to detect rapid changes in light. A high temporal resolution means the eye can distinguish fast-moving objects clearly. A low temporal resolution means fast movement becomes a blur. In cold water, retinas of cold-blooded animals slow down dramatically. Their temporal resolution drops. A fast-moving prey animal in cold, deep water becomes harder for a cold-blooded predator to track precisely. The eye cannot update its picture of the world fast enough to follow the movement accurately. The swordfish's heated retina maintains full temporal resolution at depth, the exact same cold water that degrades every other predator's visual tracking ability has almost no effect on the swordfish. Its eyes are functionally identical to how they perform at the warm surface. What this means in practical terms during a hunt is that the swordfish can track the rapid, erratic movements of fleeing squid in the twilight zone with the same precision it uses at the surface. Its brain processes the visual data fast enough to anticipate where the prey is going, not just where it was a moment ago. It can adjust its slashing strike mid-approach in ways that cold-blooded predators simply cannot manage. Meanwhile, the giant squid's visual processing, despite those enormous eyes gathering every available photon in the darkness, is running at cold blood speed in the same environment. When the swordfish makes its approach, the squid's eyes see it. The signal travels to the squid's brain. The brain processes the threat and sends signals to the muscles to initiate a jet escape. All of this happens at the speed of a cold nervous system in cold water. The swordfish's decision-making, happening in a warm brain, runs faster. The gap in reaction time is not enormous. The squid is still a fast animal capable of explosive movement, but in a predator-prey encounter where the margin between escape and capture is measured in fractions of a second, reaction time is everything. There is another layer to this advantage. The swordfish's heated brain is also processing environmental information faster than cold-blooded competitors. It can detect changes in current, bioluminescent activity, and prey movement patterns more quickly. Scientists believe this gives the swordfish an ability to predict the movement patterns of the deep scattering layer with greater accuracy, arriving in the right place at the right depth at the right moment. It hunts smarter in the cold because its brain never gets cold. No other large bony fish in the ocean has cracked this problem. The swordfish is unique among them, and that uniqueness is precisely why it can enter the giant squid's territory every single day and be effective in it, while other surface predators cannot. The swordfish does not just visit the twilight zone, it owns it during the hours it is there. Every day, the swordfish migrates vertically through the ocean. At night, it hunts near the surface. Tagged swordfish, tracked by researchers, spend nighttime hours in the top 100 to 400 feet of water, where temperatures are warmer and prey that has migrated up from the deep is available in dense concentrations. This is where most recreational fishing for swordfish happens, by drift fishing at night with baits suspended in the upper water column. As dawn approaches, something changes. The prey that came up to feed at the surface through the night begins its own descent. The organisms of the deep scattering layer, the lanternfish, the small squid, the crustaceans and jellies, start moving back down into the twilight zone before daylight makes them visible to surface predators, and the swordfish follows them down. Tracking data collected over years shows a consistent pattern. Swordfish descend at dawn to depths ranging from roughly 300 to over 1,000 feet following the descending mass of prey. During daytime hours, they spend most of their time in the mesopelagic zone. By evening, they ascend again. This is called diel vertical migration, and the swordfish is one of the largest predators on Earth that performs it daily. The deepest recorded single dive for a tagged swordfish reached over 3,700 feet. This is below the twilight zone entirely, into a region called the bathypelagic zone, where the pressure is more than 100 times what it is at the surface. For a swordfish to function at that depth, the heated eye and brain system is not optional. It is the only reason the dive is possible. Most of the time, the swordfish targets depths between 600 and 2,000 feet during daylight. This range overlaps precisely with the preferred depth range of giant squid. The squid lives permanently in this zone. The swordfish arrives every morning and departs every evening. One way to think about it, the twilight zone is a neighborhood. The giant squid lives there full time. The swordfish commutes in every day. The swordfish knows this neighborhood better than most surface predators. Because it visits daily, has evolved the thermal tools to function there, and follows the same prey migration routes consistently enough to have shaped its own biology around the schedule. But the deep scattering layer that both animals are following is itself worth stopping on, because it is one of the strangest phenomena in the ocean, and understanding it explains why the swordfish descends with such regularity and in such numbers. During the Second World War, sonar operators on ships started noticing something strange. At certain depths, sonar pings were bouncing back as if there was a solid floor beneath the ship, but the ocean was thousands of feet deep. The return was coming from the wrong place, and what was stranger still was that this false floor moved. Every evening it rose toward the surface. Every morning it sank back down. For years, naval researchers were baffled. The best explanations anyone had were uncertain guesses about temperature layers or underwater geography that somehow shifted with the time of day. Eventually, they figured out the truth. The sonar was bouncing off living creatures, trillions of them. The deep scattering layer is one of the largest biological migrations on Earth, and it happens every single day, in every ocean, completely invisible to anyone standing on the surface. At dawn, the organisms of the mesopelagic zone begin their descent. Lanternfish, each about the size of a finger, but present in staggering numbers, possibly among the most numerous vertebrates on the planet. Small squid of dozens of species, krill, copepods, jellies, bristlemouths, and hundreds of other creatures, all moving down together in a layer that can be hundreds of feet thick and span entire ocean basins. They descend to escape the light. In the darkness of the twilight zone, they are largely invisible to surface predators that hunt by sight. They rest and hide through the daylight hours. At dusk, they rise again, upward, toward the surface, to feed in the cover of darkness on the plankton blooming in the surface waters. Then back down before dawn. This migration transports an enormous amount of biological material, carbon, energy, chemical nutrients, vertically through the ocean every single day. It is one of the primary mechanisms by which energy from the sunlit surface reaches the deep sea. Scientists studying ocean carbon cycles consider it critically important for understanding how the ocean processes atmospheric carbon. For the swordfish, it is a daily food delivery. The swordfish does not chase individual animals. It follows the layer. When the deep scattering layer descends in the morning, the swordfish descends with it into the same depth range, hunting through the densest concentrations of prey in the twilight zone. The giant squid lives in this same environment and eats from this same layer. It is not following the migration. It lives within the migration. So every morning, the swordfish arrives in the twilight zone to feed, and the giant squid is already there, already hunting, already present in the same water column, where the swordfish is now swinging its bill. The overlap is not a coincidence. It is ecology. Two large predators following the same food source into the same place at the same time. Scientists cannot watch the swordfish hunt in the twilight zone. The environment is too deep, too dark, and too vast for consistent observation. So they do the next best thing. They open the stomachs. Fishery observers aboard commercial fishing vessels have spent years collecting stomach contents from swordfish brought up in longline catches. These samples come from hundreds of individual fish across multiple ocean regions, multiple years, and multiple seasons. Analyzed together, they build a portrait of the swordfish's diet that no amount of direct observation could produce. The picture is clear and consistent. Squid dominate. In one major study, analyzing nearly 300 swordfish caught in the California current between 2007 and 2014, squid remains made up the majority of identified prey. Cephalopods, the group that includes squid, octopus, and related animals, appeared in stomach after stomach. Jumbo squid were the single most important prey item by weight for larger swordfish. Other squid species filled in behind. In a study of swordfish in the Northeast Atlantic, cephalopods accounted for almost 60% of prey by mass. In the subtropical Northeast Pacific, one study found cephalopods making up over 98% of identified prey content. Nearly every stomach sampled showed squid in some quantity. A classic study from the western North Atlantic analyzed over 160 swordfish stomachs and found squid present in over 80% of them. 80% in the majority of swordfish sampled across that study. Squid was the primary meal. The data across every ocean region tells essentially the same story. Wherever swordfish go, they eat squid, not occasionally. As a primary and dominant food source, this makes practical sense. Squid are abundant throughout the mesopelagic zone. They are the most calorie-dense prey available in the deep scattering layer. A swordfish that follows the morning migration down to 600 to 2,000 feet is swimming through the highest concentration of squid available anywhere in the water column. The slash and stun technique works effectively against the schooling and clustered behavior of many squid species. The giant squid is the largest squid in the swordfish's range. The question of whether swordfish target giant squid specifically or encounter them opportunistically while hunting smaller species is harder to answer. Giant squid remnants in swordfish stomachs are rare in the published literature, but this absence is not surprising. A swordfish eating a giant squid would produce remains that digest quickly and are hard to identify to species, and the size match between a large adult giant squid and a swordfish makes it a challenging encounter even for a well-armed predator. What the stomach data establishes is the baseline. Swordfish eat squid. They eat squid as their primary food source. They dive into the zone where the giant squid lives every single day, and they are equipped with a combination of tools, the heater organ, the blade, the speed, that gives them a meaningful advantage over cold-blooded prey in that environment. The stage is set. The giant squid and the swordfish share the twilight zone, but they do not share it on the same schedule. The swordfish arrives at dawn. It descends from its nighttime surface hunting grounds, following the deep scattering layer on its morning retreat. For most of the daylight hours, the swordfish is in the mesopelagic zone, hunting through the densest concentrations of prey. The giant squid is already there when the swordfish arrives. It was there through the night. It will be there when the swordfish leaves. The twilight zone is the giant squid's permanent address, not a hunting excursion. This scheduling creates a specific and predictable zone of danger for the squid. Every morning, across every ocean, the swordfish descend, and the giant squid has no option to relocate. It cannot move to a safer depth to avoid the arrival. The twilight zone is its entire world. Going deeper means colder water with even less oxygen, which the squid's physiology tolerates poorly. Going shallower means exposure to surface predators and increasing light, which undercuts the darkness the squid depends on for both hunting and concealment. The squid is cornered by its own optimal habitat, but there is another layer to this timing problem that scientists find particularly fascinating. The giant squid does hunt at night. Evidence from stomach contents and isotope analyses suggests that giant squid may shift their own activity levels across the day-night cycle, hunting more actively at night and resting or drifting more passively during the day. If the giant squid is in a less active, resting state when the swordfish arrives at dawn, its responsiveness to incoming threats may be reduced at precisely the moment the threat appears. A predator arriving in force at the moment its prey is least alert. In deep-sea research, this kind of timing overlap is not unusual. Many predator-prey relationships in the twilight zone are built around slight mismatches in behavioral cycles, where one animal's resting period aligns with another's peak hunting window. The swordfish does not plan this. It follows the food, but the result, a fast, warm-eyed, blade-equipped hunter entering the twilight zone at the moment the squid's own activity cycle is at a lower point, creates a window where the encounter favors the attacker. This window does not last forever. As the day progresses and the squid's awareness increases, the encounter dynamics shift, and as the swordfish begins its ascent back toward the surface in the late afternoon, the overlap zone shrinks. The dangerous hours are at dawn and through the morning. The hours when the swordfish is fresh from its descent, warm-eyed, hungry, and moving through water dense with prey. And somewhere in that same darkness, the giant squid is already there, waiting, floating, enormous, and trying to sense what is coming before it arrives. Up next, we look at exactly what that size comparison means when these two animals end up in the same piece of water. Put these two animals next to each other, and the comparison surprises people. The giant squid gets the dramatic reputation, 43 feet long, including tentacles, 600 pounds, arms lined with serrated suckers, a beak that can sever a fish spine, the creature that inspired the Kraken legend, the monster of the deep. The swordfish is 14 feet long. It weighs up to 1,200 pounds. In terms of raw weight, the swordfish wins. A large swordfish is heavier than a large giant squid, and the swordfish's weight is concentrated in dense, powerful muscle rather than distributed across a long, fluid-filled body. The squid's length is misleading. Those long tentacles and arms make the animal look enormous, but stretch a rubber band across a room and it has not gained any mass. The swordfish's body is built for impact, 1,200 pounds of muscle and cartilage, no scales to slow it down, a body shaped specifically to accelerate through water with minimum resistance. When that body reaches full speed and the bill sweeps laterally, the combined force of the strike is significant enough to stun or kill animals, a fraction of the swordfish's size instantly. Against a giant squid, the math is more complicated. The squid is not fragile. Its arms are thick and powerful. Its mantle is dense muscle. The suckers can grip with enormous force. A fully functioning giant squid that gets its arms around a swordfish creates a threat in return. Those serrated rings can tear into fish flesh. The beak can cut. The grip can restrict movement. But the word functioning matters here. A giant squid at full capacity is a genuinely dangerous prey animal. A giant squid that has just been slashed across its feeding tentacles by a bill moving at 40 miles per hour is a different situation. The slash does not need to kill the squid. It needs to disrupt the squid's response system at the moment when the response is most critical. The first pass is the swordfish's biggest advantage. If the bill contacts the tentacles on the initial strike, the squid's reach is immediately reduced. Its ability to grab at the swordfish from a distance collapses. Now the encounter is closer range, and at close range, the weight and speed advantage of the swordfish is harder to overcome. The squid has one major weapon in this situation: its jet propulsion. A full contraction of the mantle can move the squid backward faster than most animals can pursue. If that jet fires before the swordfish closes distance, the squid can open enough space to reset the encounter. The question of who wins in any individual encounter between these two animals is genuinely open. There are too many variables. Size of the squid, size of the swordfish, whether the swordfish's first pass connected, whether the squid detected the approach early enough to jet away before engagement. What is not open is the question of which animal has the structural advantage in the environment where they meet. And that answer points clearly toward the swordfish. Hot eyes in cold water, a weapon that works at range before the squid can respond at range, and the ability to choose when and how the encounter begins. The squid rarely gets to choose. The giant squid has spent millions of years developing answers to the threats it faces. Those answers are real, effective, and refined by relentless pressure from predators. Against many of those predators, they work extremely well. Against a swordfish, each one faces a specific problem. The ink cloud comes first, the most visible defense. When threatened, the squid fires a dense cloud of dark, melanin-rich fluid through its siphon into the water around it. The cloud is thick enough to block vision. It holds its shape for long enough to obscure the squid's escape direction. Against a sperm whale hunting by echolocation, ink does almost nothing. Sound passes through ink clouds as if they are not there. But against a visual predator hunting by sight in dim water, ink theoretically creates a meaningful screen. The problem with ink against a swordfish is timing. The swordfish's first attack is a high-speed pass, a slash-and-continue movement that covers significant distance in a fraction of a second. The squid must detect the incoming swordfish, process the threat, initiate the ink discharge, and discharge enough fluid to create an effective screen, all before the swordfish's bill reaches it. That sequence takes time. In cold water, with a cold nervous system, it takes more time than in warm water, and the swordfish, with a warm brain, is making decisions faster than the squid's cold nervous system is processing the threat. The ink defense works best as a follow-up after the first contact, when the squid has a moment of space to deploy it. In a first-pass scenario, the squid often does not have that moment. Jet propulsion is the most powerful escape tool the squid has. A full contraction of the mantle pushes a large quantity of water through the siphon rapidly, propelling the squid backward at significant speed. Against a sperm whale, which is large and moves at moderate speed in hunting mode, a good jet escape can open enough distance to matter. Against a swordfish with burst speed between 35 and 50 miles per hour, the calculus changes. The swordfish can cover the distance the squid creates with a jet burst in a very short time. The squid's jet is a one-shot mechanism. After a full contraction, the mantle must refill with water before it can fire again. That refilling takes a moment. If the swordfish is fast enough to close the distance before the second jet fires, the escape window closes. The tentacle sacrifice is the most dramatic defense. Some squid species can shed a limb under extreme threat, leaving it behind as a distraction while the body escapes. Evidence from recovered giant squid specimens, many of which are missing tentacles, suggests this may happen. A wriggling detached tentacle draws attention away from the retreating body. Against a swordfish pursuing at speed, a falling tentacle may not distract it for long. The swordfish is following the largest mass signal in the water, and the main body of the squid is considerably larger than a shed tentacle. Each defense has a version of the same flaw. They were built to handle the threats that shaped them. The sperm whale shaped the eyes. The deep-sea environment shaped the ink and the jet. But the swordfish attacks from a slightly different angle than any of those pressures selected for. The sperm whale and the swordfish both hunt giant squid. The encounters are completely different. A sperm whale dives slowly compared to the speeds of mesopelagic predators. It is enormous, tens of thousands of pounds, and moves into the twilight zone on breath-hold dives that last up to 90 minutes. Its primary hunting tool is echolocation, clicking sounds that bounce off prey and return to the whale's enormous forehead, giving it a three-dimensional acoustic picture of the water around it. The sperm whale builds a picture of where the squid is through sound, then moves to close the distance. This gives the squid two separate warning windows. The first is the bioluminescent alarm. As the whale descends through plankton-rich water, it disturbs organisms that produce light. Those tiny flashes spread outward, and the giant squid's dinner plate eyes, built specifically for this signal, detect the approaching glow from up to 400 feet away. 400 feet. The squid has time to begin moving before the whale is anywhere close. The second warning is acoustic. Sperm whales produce extremely loud clicks during hunting. These sounds travel through water at over 4 times the speed they travel through air. The giant squid can likely sense pressure waves and low-frequency vibrations through sensory structures along its body, giving it a secondary alert even before the bioluminescent warning triggers. When the squid jets away from a sperm whale, it is fleeing something that has already telegraphed its presence hundreds of feet away, and is moving at a speed the squid can potentially outpace for a critical few seconds. A swordfish does not hunt this way. A swordfish hunting at depth does not echolocate. It does not announce its presence with loud clicks. It is a visual hunter moving at high speed through water. When it dives into the twilight zone, it triggers bioluminescent plankton the same way a whale does, creating the diffuse glow the squid's eyes are calibrated to detect. But there is a critical difference in what that glow means. A whale creating a bioluminescent signal is approaching from a significant distance, moving at a whale's pace. The squid has time. A swordfish creating the same signal may already be at hunting range by the time the squid processes it. The swordfish is smaller than a whale, meaning it disturbs less water and triggers bioluminescence across a smaller radius. The signal appears later relative to the threat's actual proximity. The squid's early warning system was tuned for whales. Large, slow-approaching, acoustically loud whales that broadcast their presence from hundreds of feet away. The swordfish fits the visual trigger of the system but does not fit the timing the system expects. The alarm goes off, but by the time the squid is processing the alarm and deciding on a response, the swordfish may already be significantly closer than a whale would be at the same signal strength. The squid is running the right software for the wrong threat. Speed underwater is not simple to measure. Water is 800 times denser than air. A fish moving at 30 miles per hour through water is working against resistance that would feel, to a human, like running through a wall of liquid concrete. The numbers that circulate about swordfish speed vary widely. Popular sources have claimed 60, even 80 miles per hour. More rigorous scientific assessments put the burst speed at a more conservative 35 to 50 miles per hour. Even at the lower end of that range, the swordfish is one of the fastest fish in the ocean. The giant squid's jet propulsion speed has been harder to study directly. Most estimates from fluid dynamics calculations suggest a full escape jet might propel the squid at somewhere around 25 miles per hour for a short burst. That is a meaningful speed. It is fast enough to escape many predators in many situations. The gap between 25 and 35 miles per hour at the short distances of an underwater predator encounter translates into a very small amount of time. Imagine both animals at a distance of 60 feet, roughly the length of 3 cars bumper to bumper. The swordfish begins its acceleration toward the squid. The squid detects the incoming threat through its bioluminescent alarm system, processes the threat signal in its cold nervous system, sends signals to the mantle muscles, begins the intake phase where the mantle draws in water before the jet can fire, and then fires the jet. All of those steps take time. In the cold water of the twilight zone, each neural signal travels at reduced speed. The muscle response is slightly slower. The water intake before the jet fires takes a fraction of a second that cannot be skipped. In that same interval, the swordfish has already closed a significant portion of the 60-foot gap. This is not a scenario where the squid has no chance. A squid that detects the swordfish early, before it begins its acceleration run, has considerably more time to initiate the jet. A squid positioned at greater distance from the approaching swordfish has more buffer. An older, larger squid with more powerful mantle muscles can generate a faster jet, but the probability math shifts significantly depending on detection timing. Early detection, jet fires with a head start, squid has a real chance. Late detection, where the bioluminescent signal reaches the squid only when the swordfish is already inside 60 feet and accelerating, the jet fires into a closing gap. Scientists believe many encounters between swordfish and squid in the twilight zone end without contact. The squid detects the swordfish early enough, jets away, and the swordfish redirects to easier prey. The squid that end up as stomach contents are likely the ones caught at a disadvantage, wrong position, delayed detection, exhausted from prior escapes, or simply unlucky in the geometry of the encounter. But the ones that escape do not come away unchanged. The fear response burns energy, the jet uses reserves, and the giant squid's behavior shifts in ways that carry their own costs. The swordfish's attack is not a grab. It is not a chase that ends in a bite. It is a sweeping, high-speed lateral strike that covers a wide arc in a very short time. When the bill makes contact with a giant squid, the physics depend entirely on where the contact happens. A strike across the mantle, the main body of the squid, can produce bruising, lacerations, or internal damage without immediately incapacitating the animal. The mantle is thick muscle and is resilient. A glancing blow here may injure without stopping the squid's ability to jet away. A direct, hard strike to the mantle at full swordfish speed is a different matter and may cause enough trauma to the internal organs or the nervous system to reduce the squid's capacity to respond. A strike across the tentacles is the more tactically significant scenario. The two feeding tentacles extend behind and around the squid during movement and rest. They are the squid's longest, most exposed structures. A swordfish bill sweeping through the water during a pass is highly likely to contact them. The tentacles are strong but not as thick as the mantle, and a high-speed lateral slash can sever or severely damage one or both. The loss of a feeding tentacle is catastrophic for the squid's hunting ability. These structures are the primary reach of the squid's attack system. Without them, the squid cannot strike prey at distance. It is limited to what it can grab with the 8 shorter arms. An animal that can no longer hunt effectively is an animal that is already dying, just slowly. Even if the tentacles are not fully severed, a forceful strike can traumatize them enough to temporarily disrupt the neural signals that control them. A squid whose tentacles are unresponsive for even a few seconds is a squid that cannot deploy its primary weapon. A strike near the eyes, the giant squid's most critical sensory organs, would be devastating. The eyes sit on the sides of the head, exposed and large. A direct strike here would not just cause local injury, it would eliminate the squid's primary detection system entirely, leaving it effectively blind in an environment where vision is the only tool available for detecting threats. Scientists examining giant squid specimens have found evidence of healed tentacle injuries, suggesting that squid do survive at least some swordfish encounters. The regeneration of lost or damaged limb tissue in cephalopods is documented in smaller squid species and is believed to occur in giant squid as well, though slowly, given the metabolic constraints of living in cold, deep water. This matters because it means encounters between the two animals are not always fatal for the squid. But surviving does not mean escaping unaffected. A scarred squid with partially regenerated tentacles is a less effective predator and a more vulnerable prey animal during the months it takes to recover. The swordfish's slash leaves a mark on the squid's biology long after the encounter itself is over. The giant squid is not defenseless in a direct encounter. Scientists who dismiss it as simply prey underestimate what a 600-pound animal with serrated suckers and a bone-cutting beak can do when cornered. When a giant squid cannot jet away and cannot deploy ink effectively, it turns toward the threat. The 8 arms are the primary contact weapons. Each arm is thick, powerful, and lined from base to tip with suckers ringed in those chitin teeth. The grip strength of a fully engaged giant squid arm has never been measured directly in a live animal, but the evidence from sperm whale encounters gives an indication. Whales bear circular scars on their heads, consistent with giant squid sucker marks. Those scars appear on the toughest skin of one of the largest animals alive. The force required to leave those marks through sperm, whale, blubber, and skin is not small. Against a swordfish, the arms can theoretically wrap around the bill, the body, or the fin structures and apply that grip. If the arms close around the swordfish's bill and prevent the lateral sweeping motion, the swordfish's primary weapon is temporarily neutralized. The squid's beak, now in range, can cut into fish tissue, but the geometry of this counter requires something specific. The squid has to close distance with the swordfish rather than flee from it. For an animal whose survival instinct is built around retreat and concealment, turning toward an attacking predator goes against every behavioral script it has developed over millions of years. There are documented cases in other large squid species of aggressive counter behavior when escape is impossible. The biological machinery for a fight response exists in cephalopods. Whether giant squid engage it regularly in encounters with swordfish is unknown, because nobody has observed these encounters directly. What is documented is that swordfish sometimes bear injuries consistent with squid attacks. Researchers examining swordfish catches have found lacerations and marks on swordfish bodies in patterns consistent with suckering contact. These are not definitive proof of giant squid specifically, since the swordfish hunts many squid species, but they establish that squid do fight back in at least some fraction of encounters. The beak presents a real threat to a swordfish as well. The chitin construction that makes the beak hard enough to sever fish spines is capable of doing meaningful damage to swordfish muscle tissue if the squid gets close enough to use it. The encounter between a large swordfish and a large giant squid is genuinely unpredictable. The swordfish has speed, thermal advantages, and a reach weapon that works before the squid can respond. The squid has mass, grip, and a beak that can cut. Which set of advantages wins depends on the specific geometry of the encounter, the size of each individual animal, and which animal dictated the terms of engagement. The swordfish almost always dictates the terms. That is the core of why the squid panics. Almost everything scientists know about the swordfish-squid relationship comes from dead animals. The twilight zone is impractical to observe directly. Even with modern submersible technology, a researcher can spend hundreds of hours at depth and encounter nothing. Because the zone is vast and animals in it are sparse relative to the space they occupy. Widder's team made 100 dives to film a single giant squid. The chances of descending at the right moment, in the right location, to witness a swordfish hunting encounter with a giant squid are effectively zero given current technology. So scientists work backwards from what they find. Swordfish stomachs are the most direct evidence. Squid beaks are hard and resist digestion. When a swordfish eats a squid, the beak accumulates in the stomach. When researchers open a swordfish stomach and find squid beaks, they know squids were eaten. The number of beaks and their size gives information about how many squid were consumed and roughly how large they were. Across hundreds of sampled swordfish, the beak evidence is consistent and overwhelming. Giant squid specimens that wash ashore or are caught in nets provide the second line of evidence. Many recovered giant squid show healed injuries, missing tentacles, scars along the mantle, healed wounds on the arms. Some of these injuries are consistent with sperm whale attack attempts. Others show patterns that do not match whale tooth marks. Lateral lacerations, cut marks across the tentacles, injuries that look more like a slashing blow than a bite. These are not definitive proof of swordfish encounters. Rocks, fishing gear, and encounters with other squid species can cause injuries too, but the pattern appears in specimens from multiple oceans and is consistent with the kind of damage a swordfish bill would produce. The swordfish also carries evidence. Some swordfish examined by researchers show sucker ring scars on their bodies, the distinctive circular marks with serrated edges that only a squid's suckers can produce. On smaller swordfish, these marks are consistent with encounters with smaller squid species. On larger swordfish, scars of a size consistent with giant squid suckers have been noted. The battle is happening. The evidence is in the wounds and the stomach contents of both animals. But the battle itself remains entirely out of view. In the 100+ years since giant squids first became a subject of serious scientific study, not a single direct predation event between a swordfish and a giant squid has been filmed or directly observed. Everything is inference. Stomach beaks and healed scars and statistical patterns in diet data. A conflict written in the bodies of both animals, readable to scientists who know where to look, completely invisible to everyone else. Sperm whales kill more giant squid than swordfish do, by a significant margin. The sperm whale is the apex predator of the deep sea. It dives to extraordinary depths on breath-hold dives, uses the most powerful biological sonar on Earth to find prey in total darkness, and consumes giant squid in enormous quantities. Scientists estimate that the world's sperm whale population consumes hundreds of millions of tons of squid per year. The squid beaks packed into whale stomachs in every region where sperm whales have been studied confirm the scale of this predation. The giant squid's most important predator is not a fish. It has never been a fish. For tens of millions of years, the primary selection pressure on the squid's biology and behavior has been a whale. So why does a swordfish still trigger a panic response? The answer lies in how fear responses work in animals, and specifically in how they are built by evolution. The giant squid did not evolve a separate behavioral response for each specific predator. it evolved a general alarm system triggered by specific signals. The bioluminescent disturbance signal in the twilight zone, the spreading glow of disturbed plankton caused by a large, fast-moving animal, is the primary trigger. When the squid's eyes detect that signal, the nervous system initiates the escape sequence. No further identification required. This makes biological sense. In an environment where a threat that reaches the squid before it reacts means death, a fast, generalized alarm response is more valuable than a slower species-specific one. The cost of triggering a false alarm, jetting away from something harmless, is much lower than the cost of failing to trigger when the threat is real. The swordfish generates the same bioluminescent signal as a sperm whale. A fast, large animal moving through plankton-rich deep water creates a glow that spreads outward in the darkness. The squid's alarm system fires. The escape response initiates. The squid is not thinking about whether this is a whale or a swordfish. Its nervous system is not performing that analysis. It is responding to the signal it evolved to respond to, because every time it failed to respond to that signal in millions of years of evolutionary history, that individual squid died before it could reproduce. The panic when swordfish appear is not irrational. It is the survival mechanism doing exactly what it was built to do. It is just that the mechanism was built for a slightly different threat, and the swordfish happens to fit the signal profile well enough to trigger it every time. The twilight zone looks dark to human eyes. To the organisms living there, it is a landscape of information written in light. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, is one of the most common phenomena in the deep sea. Scientists estimate that the majority of organisms in the mesopelagic zone produce some form of bioluminescent light. Blue-green flashes and glows are produced constantly by bacteria, by jellies, by crustaceans, by fish, and by the small plankton-sized organisms called dinoflagellates that drift throughout the water column. Most of this light has specific purposes. Countershading, where animals produce light from their undersides to match the faint downwelling light from above and become invisible against it. Lures, where predators produce light to attract curious prey toward their mouths. Distress signals, like the burglar alarm jellyfish. Communication between members of the same species. But some bioluminescence is incidental. When a large animal moves through water containing dinoflagellates, those organisms flash in response to the mechanical disturbance. They do not choose to flash. The movement triggers them. A large whale descending through a dense cloud of dinoflagellates produces a visible glow that trails behind it like a dim bioluminescent wake. This is the signal the giant squid's eyes were shaped to detect. The detection range depends on the density of dinoflagellates in the local water and the size of the approaching animal. A sperm whale, which is massive and moves large volumes of water as it descends, can trigger a visible bioluminescent signal, detectable at roughly 400 feet. A swordfish, which is much smaller, disturbs less water and triggers a proportionally smaller bioluminescent signal. This size difference in signal strength is significant. It means the swordfish registers as a threat signal at a shorter detection distance than a sperm whale would. The same bioluminescent alarm fires, but it fires later, when the swordfish is closer. And there is another complication. The twilight zone is not uniformly populated with dinoflagellates. Their density varies by location, season, and depth within the zone. In areas where dinoflagellate density is low, the bioluminescent signal from any moving animal is weaker and detectable only at close range. A swordfish descending into a dinoflagellate-sparse patch of the twilight zone might be nearly invisible to the giant squid's alarm system until it is already within the range where an attack can begin. The alarm that evolved to give the squid 400 feet of warning against a whale can shrink to 50 feet or less against a swordfish in the wrong conditions. The giant squid is not stupid. Its alarm system is genuinely sophisticated, but it is operating in an environment with incomplete information, and it evolved those eyes for a different scale of threat than the one that shows up every morning with a 4-foot blade. What looks like a single conflict between two specific animals is actually the current frame of a story that has been running for tens of millions of years. The giant squid did not always have eyes the size of dinner plates. Its ancestors had smaller eyes, reasonable for the depth they lived at and the threats they faced. The eyes grew because the threats got worse. Starting roughly 50 million years ago, toothed whales evolved echolocation and began diving deep for the squid populations that encountered these new hunters. The ones that survived were the ones whose eyes happened to be slightly larger, allowing slightly earlier detection of the bioluminescent disturbance preceding a dive. Those squids lived longer, reproduced more, and passed their slightly larger eye genes forward. Over millions of generations, this pressure accumulated. The eyes grew and grew, pushed by the relentless selection pressure of an extremely effective predator. By the time the eyes reached their current size, they provided enough early warning against sperm whales that the squid population stabilized. The arms race reached a temporary equilibrium. The whale could not easily improve its detection of still squid in dark water. The squid could not easily improve its early detection beyond what dinner plate eyes already provided. The swordfish entered this dynamic as a different kind of pressure entirely. The swordfish does not hunt by echolocation. It does not announce itself with loud clicks from hundreds of feet away. It approaches visually, fast, and warm-eyed. The evolutionary selection pressure it creates on squid populations is different in shape from what the whales created. Squid that detected swordfish earlier and reacted faster survived at higher rates. Over many generations, squid with slightly faster neural processing, slightly more sensitive response to the bioluminescent alarm, or slightly stronger jet propulsion were more likely to survive swordfish encounters and reproduce. The arms race between the giant squid and its predators is ongoing. The squid's eyes were the product of 50 million years of whale pressure. Its response to swordfish is layered on top of that, modifying the same system in different directions, optimizing a detection mechanism built for one threat to work adequately against another. The swordfish is also evolving. The heated eye and brain system is not a fixed trait that appeared fully formed. It developed over millions of years of selection pressure, favoring individuals that could hunt effectively at depth in cold water. The swordfish that could maintain visual acuity deeper and colder expanded their hunting range and ate more. Their genes spread. The heater organ improved across generations. Both animals are in the middle of this story. The current versions are not the final versions. In another 50 million years, both may be entirely different from what they are today. The deep ocean is not a static battleground. It is an engine. The twilight zone is crowded with food. At the surface and in shallow water, large predators compete intensely for limited prey. Tuna, dolphins, sharks, seabirds, and dozens of other species all hunt in the sunlit zone simultaneously. The prey there, while abundant, is shared across an enormous number of competitors. A predator at the surface is one of many. In the twilight zone, the list of competitors shrinks dramatically. Most surface predators cannot function at the temperatures and depths of the mesopelagic zone. A dolphin can dive to a few hundred feet for short periods, but cannot sustain hunting at 600 to 2,000 feet. Most sharks, cold-blooded and without heated eyes, slow down in the cold water and lose visual acuity. Tuna, which do have some capacity for regional endothermy, can dive into the mesopelagic zone, but do so for shorter periods and with less sustained effectiveness than the swordfish. The swordfish's combination of the heated eye, the heated brain, the smooth, scaleless, highly streamlined body, and the slash and stun technique gives it a specific and significant competitive advantage at depth. It can sustain effective hunting in the twilight zone through the full daylight hunting window, following the deep scattering layer through its daily position changes, and hunting through the densest available concentrations of squid and fish. While other surface predators are competing for the same finite prey pool near the surface, the swordfish is hunting in a zone that, from a large predator perspective, is nearly empty. The caloric value of that advantage is enormous. The deep scattering layer contains concentrations of squid and fish that may exceed what is available in surface waters on a per-unit volume basis. A swordfish that spends 6 to 8 hours hunting in the twilight zone every day has access to prey resources that most of its competitors cannot reach. This is why the heated eye system justified the enormous biological cost of developing it. Maintaining an organ that burns energy specifically to heat the brain and eyes uses metabolic resources constantly. It is expensive, the way a furnace running through winter is expensive, but the payoff is exclusive access to hunting grounds so rich in prey that the investment pays back many times over. The swordfish is not visiting the twilight zone because it is the best option. It is visiting because it evolved the specific tools to be the dominant predator there. And that dominance comes partly at the expense of animals that were already there, like the giant squid, and did not design their survival systems with this particular visitor in mind. The heated eye system solves one problem and creates another. Keeping the brain and eyes significantly warmer than the surrounding water requires constant energy expenditure. The mitochondria-dense heater organ is burning fuel continuously whenever the swordfish is at depth in cold water. This is metabolically expensive. The swordfish must consume enough food at depth to offset the energy cost of maintaining that thermal differential, in addition to the energy required for swimming, digestion, and all the other biological functions running simultaneously. This creates a constraint. The swordfish can sustain its twilight zone hunting window for a limited time before the energy balance tips. If hunting is poor and prey is scarce in a given day's dive, the swordfish burns more energy maintaining its heated system than it gains from the food it catches. On days like this, the dive becomes a net loss, and the swordfish must surface, warm its whole body in the surface layer, and potentially fast until conditions improve. This is why the swordfish does not live permanently in the twilight zone the way the giant squid does. The squid's ammonium chloride buoyancy system costs almost nothing to maintain once it is in place. The squid can float indefinitely at depth with minimal energy expenditure. The swordfish cannot. It requires fuel. When the fuel runs low, it must leave. The swordfish also tolerates an extremely wide range of water temperatures, from about 41 degrees Fahrenheit in cold, deep water to around 80 degrees at the warm surface. This thermal flexibility is one of the broadest of any large predator in the ocean, and it is what allows the daily vertical migration to function. A predator that could only tolerate a narrow temperature window could not commute between the cold twilight zone and the warm surface every day. The thermal system also has a geographic boundary. The heated eye system works most effectively in regions where a strong temperature difference exists between the surface and the depths. This temperature gradient, called the thermocline, is sharpest in tropical and temperate oceans. In polar regions, the temperature difference between surface and deep water is much smaller, and the advantage of the heater organ is correspondingly reduced. Swordfish distributions reflect this. They are most abundant and most active in temperate and subtropical latitudes where the thermocline is steep. This means the giant squid living in temperate and subtropical ocean regions faces the highest pressure from swordfish predation. Squid in polar or subpolar regions, where swordfish are less common and less effective, operate under somewhat different conditions. Geography determines the stakes of the encounter. The conflict between the giant squid and the swordfish is one relationship inside a much larger structure. The twilight zone is full of these interactions. Every species in the mesopelagic zone is simultaneously a predator and prey for something else. Lanternfish eat copepods and are eaten by larger fish. Bristlemouths eat tiny crustaceans and are eaten by squid. Small squid eat lanternfish and are eaten by giant squid and swordfish. Giant squid are eaten by swordfish and sperm whales. Sperm whales, at the apex of this system, are eaten by nothing except eventually bacteria when they die. This layered structure of predator and prey in the twilight zone is not stable in the sense of being unchanging. It fluctuates with prey abundance, seasonal migration patterns, oceanographic conditions, and the long-term evolutionary changes happening in every species simultaneously. What the swordfish-squid relationship reveals is how completely the Twilight Zone has been occupied by specialized predators, despite being largely invisible to humans. The mesopelagic zone makes up about 20% of the ocean's volume. It is the largest habitat on Earth, and yet most people have never heard of half the animals that live there. The deep scattering layer itself, the mechanism that drives both animals into the same zone every day, is a phenomenon of global ecological importance that most people have never encountered. The daily vertical migration of trillions of organisms through the water column is one of the largest movements of biological material on the planet. It affects ocean carbon cycles, nutrient distribution, and the energy budget of the entire deep sea. The swordfish-squid rivalry sits at the intersection of these processes. Two large predators, both following the same food signal, both shaped by the same evolutionary pressures, meeting in the same zone every morning because the zone contains what both of them need. The Twilight Zone is not a quiet, empty place below the interesting part of the ocean. It is a battlefield operating at a scale and complexity that scientific understanding is still only beginning to map. Most of the conflict there has never been seen. Most of the species there have never been named. Most of the ecological relationships connecting them have never been studied. The story of the swordfish and the giant squid is one of the few visible threads in an enormous tapestry that humans have barely started to examine. The conflict between the swordfish and the giant squid has been happening every day across every major ocean for millions of years. Humans have watched almost none of it. The deepest consistent human observation of the ocean stops at recreational scuba depth, around 130 feet in most cases. Beyond that, direct human presence requires specialized technology, submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, and autonomous underwater systems that are expensive, slow, and cover almost no ground relative to the size of the ocean they are supposed to be exploring. The mesopelagic zone begins where practical human observation ends. Everything that happens below 600 feet happens in the dark, under crushing pressure, in water too cold for human physiology, in a space so vast it would take thousands of the most advanced research vessels decades to survey systematically. Scientists have still never directly observed a swordfish hunting encounter with a giant squid, not once. In the entire history of marine biology, with every submersible dive and every baited camera deployment and every fishing observer and every remotely operated vehicle survey, this specific event has not been captured. What exists instead is a growing body of inference. Diet studies give the stomach contents. Tissue damage in recovered specimens gives the wound patterns. Stable isotope analysis of squid tissue gives information about what they ate, and in some cases can inform scientists about the stress levels they experienced. Tag data from swordfish gives the depth and timing of dives. Behavioral observations of recovered giant squid in rare surface encounters give some information about the squid's defensive repertoire. The picture built from all of this is coherent. The overlap is real. The predation occurs. The behavioral fear response in the squid is documented indirectly through the alarm systems that exist in the squid's biology. The swordfish clearly eats squid as its primary food source and regularly dives into the exact depths where giant squid live. But the movie of the encounter does not exist. The footage that would show exactly how it begins, how it ends, and what each animal does in between has never been shot. The lack of footage means that some of the specific details that scientists most want to understand, whether swordfish specifically target giant squid or encounter them while hunting smaller species, whether giant squid fight back in most encounters or flee consistently, and what the survival rate for squid in these encounters actually is, remain unknown. The deep ocean keeps its secrets behind a barrier that humans have not yet figured out how to cross cheaply enough or reliably enough to answer the questions they most want to ask. The rivalry between the swordfish and the giant squid is not just a biological curiosity. It is a functional component of a food web that extends from the deep sea to the surface and into the atmosphere. Swordfish are heavily fished. Commercial longline fishing has targeted the species globally for decades, and several regional swordfish populations have experienced significant decline under fishing pressure. The North Atlantic swordfish population in particular was severely overfished through the 1980s and 90s before international management measures were implemented, and recovery has been slow and uneven. What would happen to the Twilight Zone food web if swordfish populations collapsed? The giant squid would be one of the primary beneficiaries, at least initially. With fewer swordfish making the daily descent into the mesopelagic zone, the predation pressure on giant squid populations would decrease. Squid that previously died in swordfish encounters would survive to reproduce. Giant squid populations could expand. Expanding giant squid populations would in turn increase predation pressure on the animals the squid eat: deep-sea fish, lanternfish, smaller squid species. This could reduce those populations, affecting the food available for other mesopelagic predators, including the deep-sea sharks and other fish that share the twilight zone with the swordfish. At the surface, the ripple effects would continue. Swordfish are a primary link between the surface ocean and the mesopelagic zone in terms of energy transfer. When swordfish eat squid at depth and are subsequently caught by humans, that energy exits the ocean food web entirely. When swordfish die naturally at the surface, they contribute their mass back to the surface food web. Without swordfish performing this vertical energy transfer daily, the connection between surface and deep water ecosystems weakens. The atmospheric effect is subtler but potentially significant. The giant squid's ammonium chloride body chemistry means that squid biomass carries large quantities of dissolved ammonia compounds. When squid die and sink, those compounds enter the deep water. Changes in squid population size alter the chemistry of the deep ocean on small but potentially meaningful scales. Ocean food webs do not have isolated actors. Every animal in the system is connected to every other animal by chains of predation, competition, and energy transfer. Remove a significant predator, and the ripples travel in every direction. The swordfish's daily commute into the twilight zone looks like just a feeding trip. It is also a structural connection between two parts of the ocean that would otherwise be much more separate. Here is what scientists know for certain. The giant squid is real. It has the largest eyes of any living animal. It lives in the twilight zone. It eats deep-sea fish and smaller squid. It is preyed upon by sperm whales. It was first filmed alive in its natural habitat in 2012, after more than a century of searching. The swordfish is real. It has a heated brain and eye system that gives it 10 times better visual processing than cold-blooded competitors at depth. It dives into the twilight zone every morning following the deep scattering layer. Its stomach contents across every ocean region consistently show squid as the dominant prey. It can slash through prey with a 4-foot blade at speeds between 35 and 50 miles per hour. The overlap between these two animals is real. The depths are the same. The timing is the same. The diet data points directly at the interaction, and yet the encounter itself remains unseen. This is the thing that drives researchers crazy. The conflict is supported by more indirect evidence than almost any other deep-sea predator interaction. Stomach contents, wound patterns, behavioral alarm systems, isotope data, depth tracking, biomechanics. Every line of evidence points at the same interaction, and still, not a single second of direct footage exists. Part of the frustration is simply technological. The twilight zone is enormous. Camera coverage of it is almost nothing. The probability of placing a camera in the right location at the right moment to capture a swordfish hunting encounter with a giant squid is essentially zero with current approaches. But part of the mystery is biological. The giant squid itself is still deeply unknown. Scientists do not know with confidence how long giant squid live. They do not know the size of the global population. They do not fully understand the reproductive behavior, the migration patterns, or the daily activity cycle. Every specimen that has been studied came from an animal that was already dead or dying. The live footage from 2012 gave about 30 seconds of useful behavioral data from a single small individual. Everything else is extrapolation from body parts. The ocean is the largest habitable space on Earth, and humans have explored less than a fifth of it. The twilight zone alone is larger than every terrestrial ecosystem combined. Inside that space, enormous animals with remarkable adaptations are hunting and being hunted every single day, and the entire event is invisible to us. The swordfish knows where the squid lives. The squid knows the swordfish is coming. The encounter happens daily. We just cannot see it yet. The ocean keeps some battles for itself, and this one, the hot-eyed blade against the dinner plate eyes in the dark, is among the oldest, the most spectacular, and the most completely hidden from the world above the waves.